name is Sarah and Happy New Year! I hope you had a fantastic time saying goodbye to 2015 and ringing in the new year with your family and friends. I would also like to say welcome to all of the new friends that have shown up on this channel in the last week or so, because there are a lot of you. So thank you so much for subscribing and joining in with me as I ramble to the internet about books. Today I am here to share with you my final reading wrap-up for 2015, all of the books that I read in the month of December. I wound up finishing a grand total of 14 books this month for a combined total of 6,282 pages and an average star rating of 4.43. Up first, Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. So this is the first book in the Throne of Glass series, which follows Selena Sardothian, a notorious assassin. In this first book, she has spent the last year in the salt mines of Endovier and is told that if she will fight in this gladiatorial competition and defeat 23 other people, then she will become the king's champion, and after 4 years of serving him, she will be able to win her freedom. I read The Assassin's Blade, which is a set of 5 prequel novellas for the series. I believe it was in the month of October, but this book was kind of underwhelming for me. I wound up giving it 2.5 out of 5 stars because it just, it was not great. There are a couple of things that I do like about it. I find the world that Sarah J. Maas is building quite intriguing, and there are a couple of characters that by the end of the book I was like, yeah, I like you. But in general, I was just not a fan. I still don't like Selena as a character. She drives me up a freaking wall, even more so in this book than she did in The Assassin's Blade, because at least in The Assassin's Blade, her arrogance is backed up with action, and that is not the case with this particular book. On top of that, most of our other characters are very stereotypical and tropey. The guy that you think is going to be the bad guy is the bad guy. The prince is like your typical, oh, my father is this horrible person and I'm not like him. I'm sweet and wonderful. You've got a love triangle that's not a love triangle that does literally 0 things to move the plot forward. So much of this book winds up focused on things that have nothing to do with the overarching plot. It was just a lot of distraction and things that didn't have anything to do with the story as a whole. So I feel like the idea behind this book was pretty solid, but the execution of it was quite flawed. I do have a full video review of this book filmed already that will be coming sometime in the month of January, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts and issues with the book, then you should be on the lookout for that soon. Up next, Illuminated by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So this is the first book in a brand new sci-fi series called The Illuminated Files. It is another one that was super hyped for me, but it totally lived up to the hype. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I loved everything about it. The story follows 2 teenagers, Katie and Ezra, who only this morning broke up and thought that that was going to be the most difficult thing they had to deal with that day, until their planet is invaded by an evil corporation and they have to go on the run for it in spaceships. Also, we just really love Katie and Ezra. Katie is sassy and spunky and wicked smart, and I just loved everything about her. And Ezra is adorable and kind of dorky, but also really smart and resourceful in his own way. And the two of them working together is just wonderful and delightful, and I love everything about it. One of the other things that I really loved about this book is one of the main characters winds up being the artificial intelligence on one of the ships, which I thought was just super fascinating, and I really love how they portrayed the AI as a character. I do have a full video review of this book coming sometime in the month of January, so be on the lookout for that if you want to hear more extensive thoughts and more of me just gushing about how fantastic this story was. Up next, Lin Lang by Rainbow Rowell. So this is my 3rd Rainbow Rowell book. I wound up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars, which is the lowest rating that I've ever given a Rainbow Rowell book. And it's not because it wasn't enjoyable, I just didn't connect with it in the same way that I connected with her other stories. So this particular book follows Georgie McCool, who is a television comedy writer. Georgie and her writing partner Seth get the opportunity to pitch a show to a super awesome executive like right after Christmas. So Georgie bails on the trip to go visit her husband Neil's family for Christmas and realizes in the process that her marriage is kind of in trouble. She has no idea what to do about it and then goes home to her parents' house to discover that when she calls Neil on the landline, she talks to him in the past. So this book is like magical realism, sort of, because you've got like a magic time traveling phone going on. So one of the things I love the most about this book is how Rainbow Rowell developed the relationship between Neil and Georgie. She goes back and forth between what's happening with present Georgie and then builds the relationship of past Neil and past Georgie for you slowly throughout the story. The way she did those flashbacks was very natural. It didn't feel info dumpy at all, and I really loved how the relationship between past Neil and past Georgie wound up developing as we progressed through the story. I also really loved the interactions between present Georgie and past Neil and all of the conversations that they had on the phone. The character of Neil in general, I just really, really liked. Similar to the other Rainbow Rowell books that I've read, all of the side characters are a lot of fun. Obviously, even though they don't get fleshed out nearly as much as our two main characters do, they don't ever feel like they're just flat characters that are there. They always have a sort of depth to them, and that's one of the things that I really love about Rainbow Rowell's writing. My biggest issue with this book was the actual character of Georgie, at least present Georgie. I liked past Georgie, and I loved the relationship between past Georgie and past Neil, but the actual character of present Georgie, who we spend a good chunk of the book with, she bothered me in a lot of ways. So I think just because of that, it sort of colored my perspective on the rest of the book, because I didn't really care that much about the actual main character. Up next, 4, a Divergent Collection. So this is a set of 4 prequel novellas about the character 4 from the Divergent series. My little sister and I were just talking one day and I saw it sitting on her shelf and I was like, may as well pick it up and read it. It's a really, really fast read, and I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy this because I'm not generally a novella person, but this was actually my favorite of the entire series, and I think a big part of that is because I don't like the character of Triss, but I love the character of 4. So these 4 novellas start 2 years before the Divergent series starts, when 4 goes through his own choosing ceremony and when he transfers from Abnegation to Divergent and all of this stuff. And so we get to see his story of how he made that decision, why he made that decision, things like that. I think one of the things that I loved the most about this is how we got to see the backstory, or at least a little bit of the backstory, of some of the other characters that show up in the Divergent series that have a pretty big impact on how the series as a whole plays out. It was a pretty quick, light read. If you even remotely enjoyed the Divergent series, but particularly if you like the character of 4, you might enjoy these novellas, but you're not going to totally lose anything if you don't read them. Up next, The Greatest Gift by Anne Voskamp. Advent devotional that was written by Anne Voskamp, who is the writer of 1000 Gifts. I read 1000 Gifts in 2014 and absolutely loved it, and I picked up The Greatest Gift for the first time during the Advent season last year. I love everything about it. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars last year. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars this year. The way that Anne Voskamp writes is just beautiful and lovely, and she has such incredible thoughts and insight, and I love this devotional. I think it's going to be one that I read every Advent season for a really, really long time. Up next, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. So chances are you've heard of this book. It's been in print for like over 75 years and has sold like a bajillion copies. The general idea of it is giving you advice on how to interact with people in a better way that will promote better relationships, particularly in regard to business and career interactions. I wound up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed a lot of the thoughts that Dale Carnegie had, and it's really interesting reading this book because you read a lot of it and you're like, well, that should be common sense, like in the way that you interact with people, but when you think about the way that most people interact, particularly in business situations, we don't usually interact in the ways that he suggests in this particular book. I definitely think this is a helpful book for pretty much anyone to read. The reason I only gave it 4 out of 5 stars is because while I did really appreciate a lot of the things that he had to say, the beginning of the book in particular felt very drawn out. Most of the chapters are set up in a way where he introduces the concept of whatever he's talking about, usually with an example, then he delves into a little bit more of the theory behind it and why most people do this thing, but this is the thing that you should do instead. And then he will give you examples of people putting this into practice in their life and how it turned out. In the early chapters in the book in particular, there were just way more examples than necessary. He would give you like 10 where you only needed 3. And so it felt like a lot of the early chapters really dragged on. As the book progressed, he cut down on that a lot and the pace really picks up. So I definitely enjoyed the latter half of this book more than the beginning of the book. I do think there's a lot of really valuable information in here, particularly for people who are very serious about their career, because there's a lot of great advice in here about how to interact with people in a professional environment that will promote better relationships with your coworkers and things like that. Up next, The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. I was gifted this book a couple of years ago during a Valentine's Day exchange, and I have heard fantastic things about this book from a lot of my friends who love C.S. Lewis. Basically what he does is he goes through the four different kinds of love. He calls them affection, friendship, eros, and charity, and just talks about what those different loves look like, how they manifest in life, and I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Certain Lewis books can be really difficult for me to wrap my brain around just because of the language he uses. This is a book that I found very easy to understand, but I really, really loved everything that he had to say, and it really has got me thinking about the different ways that I show affection and how I interact in my friendships with people. This is definitely one that I will be rereading in the future because there is so much wisdom in here about loving and loving people well. This was a super, super fascinating read, and it is definitively one of my favorite Lewis books that I've read thus far. So I would highly, highly recommend checking this one out. And finally, the Big Kahuna. I read the entire Harry Potter series in 1 month. So this was my third read of the Harry Potter series. I read it for the first time in 2011 and then reread it last December and decided to participate in Harry Xmas to You and reread the series this December as well. Part of that was inspired by the release of the illustrated edition of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which is how I started off my reread of this series. If you guys have not seen the illustrated edition of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone yet, like, just go to Barnes & Noble and look at it because it is absolutely gorgeous. The illustrations, like, it's just so, so lovely. Whether you've read the series 1 time or 15 times, reading the illustrated edition is experiencing it in a completely new way. And I absolutely loved reading this first book in an illustrated edition. This particular book gets 5 out of 5 stars for me in general, but this illustrated edition in particular is just absolutely exquisite. So like I said, this was my third read of the series, and I just love the story more and more every single time I read it. I took a really long time to jump on the Harry Potter bandwagon. Like I said, I didn't read the series for the first time until 2011, and I was very stubborn about not wanting to read it just because everyone else wanted to read it, but truly, it's just a fantastic series. Like I already said, Sorcerer's Stone gets 5 out of 5 stars, both the book itself and in particular the illustrated edition. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets is my least favorite book in the series and gets 4 out of 5 stars from me, and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is my second favorite in the series and gets 5 out of 5 stars from me. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire gets 4.5 out of 5 stars, as does Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And our final two, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, both get 5 out of 5 stars from me. But Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, from the very beginning, has always been my favorite book in this series. So like I said, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is my second favorite book in the series, and I love it for a couple of reasons. One is that it introduces 2 of my absolute favorite characters in the series, Remus Lupin and Sirius Black. It also has one of my absolute favorite scenes in the entire series, which is the scene in the Shrieking Shack. They totally screwed it up in the movie, but in the book it is freaking fantastic. So Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is a book that I have a love-hate relationship with. There are some elements in this book that are some of my favorites in the entire series, and then there are others that I just cannot handle. They drive me crazy. One of the things that I do love about this book is this is where we get the most interaction with Sirius Black, who, as I mentioned previously, is one of my favorite characters in the entire series. I love to see how his relationship with Harry is starting to develop more, and it's just fantastic and wonderful, and I love it. But even though I love the relationship that develops between Harry and Sirius, angsty Harry drives me crazy. Like, I understand on some level why he is frustrated because no one is telling him what the frick is going on, but at the same time, like, dude, stop taking it out on your friends. It is not their fault, and yeah, I can't handle the angst. Angsty Harry drives me crazy. Also, I think it goes without saying that Dolores Umbridge is someone that I consistently want to punch in the throat, but Dolores Umbridge brings out Sassy McGonagall, and I love Sassy McGonagall. But the culmination of it all for me is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. From the very first time I finished this series to this current reread, Deathly Hallows has been my favorite book. It is perfect. Probably my favorite scene in this entire series is the final battle between Harry and Voldemort when they're in the Great Hall, and they completely screwed this up in the movies, but that actual final scene is just so fantastic. I love everything about it. It is the culmination of so many great and wonderful things that Rowling has been putting together into this series, and I love it. I love everything about it, and you cannot convince me that any of the other books is better, because this is the best one. There's a whole lot more I could say about the Harry Potter series. I may do some Harry Potter themed videos in the months to come, possibly around the release of Fantastic Beasts and where to find them, because even though the series has been out for years and years, I would love to talk about them because it really is just a fantastic, wonderful series. So there you have it, friends. Those are the 14 books that I read in the month of December to round out my 2015 reading year. My grand total for the year wound up being 88 books, and I will be sharing videos with my favorite and least favorite books of the year along with my statistics for the year in the next week. So be on the lookout for those to wrap up the 2015 reading year before we really jump into 2016. And as I've already mentioned, I have reviews coming of Illuminated and Throne of Glass, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts on those, be on the lookout for those as well. If you guys have read any of these books, even if it's just Harry Potter, I would love to hear your thoughts and talk about them with you in the comments below, so please let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time as we jump in to a brand new reading year. Bye! I hope you had a fantastic... Ow! Illuminated by Amy Kaufman and Creed... So this is my thirst... Crap. No! Ah, book's falling! That did not go well.